They told me I wasn't welcome 3 days before New Year's Eve. Not in a conversation, not face to face, in the family group chat. The message was short, carefully worded, and sent by my mother, but everyone knew it came from my father. This year, we're keeping New Year's Eve small, immediate family only. We think it's best if you don't come. No explanation, no apology, just a quiet ban dressed up as logistics. I stared at my phone for a long time, waiting for the familiar wave of embarrassment to hit, the one that usually came when my family decided, again, that I didn't quite fit. But it didn't come. Instead, there was something else. Stillness. I typed back a simple reply. Understood. Have a good New Year. I didn't add an emoji. I didn't ask why. I didn't argue. Because this wasn't the first time. Growing up, I had always been the extra one, the child who asked too many questions, the one who didn't follow the plan, the one who left early, came back late, or didn't come back at all. My older brother was the golden child, corporate job, clean resume, predictable promotions. My younger sister stayed close, married early, gave my parents grandchildren, and a sense of control. And me? I dropped out of a stable career to experiment. I moved cities without warning. I talked about ideas instead of titles. To them, I was unreliable. To them, New Year's Eve was about celebrating success, and in their eyes, I hadn't earned a seat at the table. I set my phone down and looked around my apartment. It was quiet, minimal, intentionally empty. The kind of place you live when you don't need to impress anyone. Outside, the city buzzed with end-of-year anticipation, fireworks advertisements, party invitations, people rushing to close deals, close chapters, close the year. I wasn't rushing, because something else was happening, something my family didn't know about, something no one knew about yet. At exactly 11:47 p.m. on December 30th, my laptop chimed. Not a notification, an alert. I was sitting on the couch in sweatpants, laptop balanced on my knees, watching numbers update in real time. I'd been watching them for weeks, small shifts, small signals, but this one was different. This one made my heart stop. I leaned closer to the screen. Then I refreshed it. Again and again. The number didn't change. It just stayed. I stood up slowly, my pulse roaring in my ears. No, I whispered. No way. I grabbed my phone and opened my email. There it was. The subject line I had been waiting for and half convinced would never come. Confirmation of acquisition finalized. I opened it. My hands were shaking now. The email was short, clinical, precise. The acquisition had closed earlier than expected. Regulatory approval had cleared overnight. The valuation had exceeded projections by a margin that didn't just change my life, it rewrote it. I sank back onto the couch, staring at the screen. The company I had built in near anonymity. The platform I'd poured years into while everyone else thought I was between things. The idea my father once called a distraction. It had just been acquired. Not for millions. Not for tens of millions. For a number so large, my brain refused to process it at first. I read the line again. Then a third time. Then I laughed. Not loudly. Not hysterically, just a quiet, stunned sound that came from somewhere deep in my chest. I wasn't just financially secure, I was, by every technical, undeniable definition, a billionaire. Overnight. The irony wasn't lost on me. 3 days earlier, my family had decided I wasn't worthy of attending New Year's Eve. 3 hours later, the world had decided otherwise. I didn't call anyone. Not my parents, not my siblings, not a single friend. I just sat there, letting the reality settle. Money doesn't explode into your life the way movies show it. There's no confetti, no soundtrack, no immediate transformation, just silence, and then questions. What now? Who do you tell? Who were you wrong about? My phone buzzed again, a message from my brother. Dad's disappointed you didn't push back. He thinks you've given up. I smiled faintly. No, I thought. I just stopped explaining myself. I didn't reply. New Year's Eve arrived cold and clear. The city was electric, every window glowing, every street alive with countdown energy. I dressed simply, black coat, clean lines, no excess. I wasn't going to a party. I wasn't staying home either. I had been invited, quietly, discreetly, to a private gathering overlooking the harbor, the kind of event where names weren't announced and success wasn't shouted, the kind of place my family would never imagine me entering. As my car pulled up, the building loomed tall and glassy, lights shimmering against the night sky. Security waved me through without hesitation. Inside, the air was calm, controlled, expensive without being loud. People mingled with drinks in hand, conversations low and deliberate. No one asked, "So what do you do?" They already knew. A man approached me near the window, smiling. "Congratulations," he said. "You closed faster than anyone expected." I replied, "Thank you. Your father must be proud." I paused. "He doesn't know yet," I said. The man raised an eyebrow. "He will." "Yes," I said softly. "He will." At midnight, the city erupted. Fireworks exploded over the water, bursts of color reflected in the glass around us. People cheered, glasses clinked. Someone started a countdown a second too late. I watched quietly, not celebrating, not hiding, just present. As the clock struck 12, my phone buzzed. A message from my sister. "Happy New Year. Dad says maybe next year you'll join us again." I looked at the screen, then at the skyline, then back at the message. "Maybe," I typed, and for the first time in my life, the word didn't feel like a compromise. I didn't tell my family that night. I didn't post anything. I didn't change my number. I didn't disappear, because the truth is, money doesn't need to announce itself. It waits. And the next morning, when markets opened, when headlines updated, when my father sat down with his coffee and unfolded the business section, he would see a name he hadn't expected, a company he'd dismissed, a story he thought he already understood, and he would realize something that would shake him far more than any argument ever could. Banning me from New Year's Eve hadn't kept me out, it had only kept him in the dark. My father found out the way he found out most things that truly mattered to him, from the paper. Not a phone call, not a private briefing, not a careful conversation that spared his pride. From ink on crisp pages, laid out neatly on the kitchen table next to his morning coffee. I didn't witness the moment, but I've replayed it enough times to see it clearly. He would have unfolded the business section the way he always did, methodical, ritualistic, glasses perched low on his nose, pen nearby in case something caught his attention that he wanted to mention later. At first, he wouldn't have noticed. The headline wasn't sensational, it didn't scream. Tech platform acquisition finalized in late-night deal. Mid-page, respectable font, conservative language, exactly the kind of story he trusted. He would have skimmed the first paragraph, nodding slightly at the mention of market conditions, timing, regulatory approval. This was his world. This was where he felt competent, superior. Then his eyes would have landed on the company name, the one he'd heard before, the one he'd dismissed years ago at his own dinner table, the one he'd once asked me with thinly veiled concern, "And when are you going to do something real?" He would have leaned closer, read slower, and then, my name, not buried, not footnoted, listed plainly, founder, majority stakeholder, primary beneficiary of the acquisition.
The number would have followed shortly after, so large it wouldn't register immediately. He would have blinked, read it again, then sat back, the chair creaking slightly beneath him as the realization crept in, not all at once, but in waves. This wasn't a rumor. This wasn't speculation. This wasn't one of my ideas. This was confirmed, public, irreversible. My brother would have walked in around then, tie half knotted, rushing for work. What? He would have asked, seeing our father frozen in place. Dad would have pointed at the paper. My brother would have laughed at first, then stopped, then read, then gone quiet. My sister would have heard raised voices from the other room and come in, still in slippers, irritation ready on her face, until she saw the headline, until she saw the name, mine. The room would have changed temperature instantly, because suddenly the narrative they'd all agreed on, the one where I was drifting, unreliable, quietly failing, collapsed under the weight of undeniable fact. My father would have cleared his throat, once, twice. "This has to be a mistake," he would have said. My brother would have shaken his head. "No, this is real." And then, the part I know for certain, my father would have felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time.
Loss of control. I was at home when my phone started ringing. Not buzzing, not vibrating. Ringing, relentlessly. I let it ring, again, and again. The third call came from my sister. I answered that one. "Is it true?" she asked, not even saying hello. "Yes," I replied. Silence. Then, quietly, "Why didn't you tell us?" I leaned back on the couch, staring at the ceiling. "You didn't ask. You assumed." "That's not fair," she said weakly. "It's accurate," I replied. Another pause. "Dad's not taking it well," she said. I closed my eyes. "I didn't do this to him. I did this despite him." She didn't argue. That told me everything. The first message from my father came an hour later. "We need to talk." No congratulations, no pride, just urgency. I didn't respond. The second message followed shortly after. "This could have implications. We should discuss strategy." Strategy. Still trying to frame this as something he could manage. I let that one sit too. By mid-afternoon, the story had spread. Online articles, industry newsletters, analyst breakdowns. My inbox filled with messages from people who had believed in me when no one else did. Engineers, early investors, advisors who'd taken calls from me when I couldn't even offer certainty. Every message carried some version of the same sentiment. You did it. Not, "We always knew you would," just, "You did it." That meant more than any apology ever could. I finally agreed to meet my father the next day. Not at his house, not at mine. Neutral ground. A quiet restaurant he liked, old-fashioned, discreet, the kind of place where conversations stayed at tables. When I arrived, he was already there, sitting straighter than usual, jaw clenched, coffee untouched. He stood when he saw me. "Sit," he said quickly, then caught himself. "Please." I sat. He looked at me like he was trying to reconcile two images that refused to merge. "You're a billionaire," he said flatly. "Yes," I replied. He shook his head slowly. "Overnight?" "No," I corrected. "Over years. You just noticed overnight." That landed harder than I expected. He cleared his throat. "Why didn't you tell us?" I folded my hands in my lap. "Because every time I tried to talk about what I was building, you told me to be realistic." "That was concern," he said defensively. "No, that was dismissal." He leaned back, exhaling. "We were worried about you." "You were worried I didn't look successful," I said. "Not that I wasn't." Silence stretched between us. Then he said something revealing.
We banned you because we thought you'd make things awkward. I nodded. By existing? By being uncertain, he said. I smiled faintly. Turns out uncertainty was temporary. He stared at his coffee. I didn't know, he muttered. I know, I said gently. He looked up at me then. I'm proud of you. The words felt late. Not empty, but late. Thank you, I said. We sat in silence for a moment longer. Then he said, You should come to the house. Everyone wants to see you. I met his eyes. That depends. On what? On whether you want me there or what I represent now. He didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was quieter. Both. I nodded slowly. Then we'll take it one step at a time, I said. When I left the restaurant, my phone buzzed again. A message from my brother this time. Guess you're hosting New Year's next year. I smiled. We'll see, I typed back. Because the truth was, becoming a billionaire hadn't changed who I was. It had changed how visible my choices became. My family hadn't banned me because they didn't love me. They banned me because I disrupted their story. And now that the truth was public, that story couldn't be repaired, only rewritten.
The moment my family realized the story had flipped, they did what they always did when control slipped through their fingers. They adjusted the narrative. Not loudly, not publicly, quietly, strategically, carefully. Within a week, the tone of every message changed. My mother, who hadn't defended me when I was banned from New Year's Eve, suddenly started sending me articles about philanthropy. You could do so much good now, one read. My sister sent a photo of her kids holding sparklers with the caption, They miss their aunt. My brother, who had once laughed at my side projects, called to ask if I had time to talk investments. None of it was accidental. They weren't celebrating me. They were repositioning themselves. And my father moved fastest of all. He invited me to dinner. Not just family, extended family. Cousins, uncles, old family friends, people who hadn't spoken to me in years but had suddenly remembered my birthday. It wasn't subtle. It was a stage. I didn't answer right away. That silence, measured, intentional, did more than any refusal could have. It unsettled them, forced them to sit with uncertainty instead of controlling it. 3 days later, my father called again. This time, his voice was different, less authoritative, more cautious. We want to celebrate you, he said. I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the city skyline. You banned me 3 days before New Year's Eve. Yes, he said, and that was a mistake. Why? I asked. He hesitated. Because we didn't understand what you were building, he said. I closed my eyes briefly. That's not why, I replied. Silence. Then carefully, then why? Because, I said, you thought I was an embarrassment. The word hung there. He didn't deny it, and that told me everything. I'm not coming to a dinner where the only thing that changed is your perception of my worth, I continued calmly. That's not fair, he said. It's accurate, I replied. Another long pause. What do you want? He asked. I thought about that question for a long time before answering. I want honesty, I said. Not pride, not repair, not optics. Then come, he said, and we'll be honest. I almost laughed. Almost. But instead I said, all right. The dinner felt exactly like I'd expected. Expensive, polished, performative. My father greeted me at the door with a hug that lasted a second too long. My mother hovered, adjusting imaginary wrinkles on the tablecloth. My siblings smiled too brightly, eyes scanning me like I might have changed shape. You look the same, my aunt said, sounding disappointed. I am, I replied. Dinner began with wine and stories that conveniently excluded every joke ever made at my expense. Every eye flicked toward me when someone mentioned business. Every compliment felt rehearsed. Then my father raised his glass.
"We're very proud," he said, voice steady, "of what she's accomplished." Applause followed. Polite, controlled. I smiled. "Thank you," I said. And then I stood. "I'd like to say something too," I added. The room quieted instantly. I didn't raise my glass. "I didn't build what I built to impress anyone," I said. "I built it because I believed in it when no one else did." Some people shifted uncomfortably. "I was banned from New Year's Eve because I didn't look successful enough." My sister's smile faltered. "I wasn't excluded because I was irresponsible," I went on. "I was excluded because my success didn't come with familiar markers." I looked directly at my father. "And now that it does, suddenly I belong." The silence was thick, unavoidable. "I'm not angry," I said, "but I'm not naive either." My brother cleared his throat. "I'm not finished," I said gently. I turned back to the table. "I love my family," I continued. "But love that's conditional on optics isn't love I'm willing to earn anymore." No one interrupted. "I'm not here to fund anything. I'm not here to rescue reputations, and I'm not here to prove that I deserved a seat." I smiled softly. I always did. I sat back down. No applause this time, just quiet. After dinner, people left quickly. Excuses, early mornings, traffic. My father walked me to the door. "You didn't have to say all that," he said quietly. "Yes," I replied, "I did." He nodded slowly. "I see you differently now." I met his eyes. "I hope you see yourself differently, too."
The aftermath was telling. The calls asking for favors stopped. The investment questions dried up. The tone shifted again, this time into something closer to respect. Not warmth, not intimacy, respect, which I realized was the only thing I'd ever wanted. My life settled into a new rhythm. I didn't move into a mansion. I didn't hire an entourage. I didn't start posting inspirational quotes about hustle. I stayed where I was, worked with people I trusted, spent time with those who had believed in me before headlines made it easy. Money didn't change my values. It revealed everyone else's. One afternoon, weeks later, my father sent a message. "I'm sorry I didn't see you sooner." I stared at it for a long time, then replied, "I stopped needing that a while ago, but thank you." And I meant it, because reconciliation doesn't always mean reunion. Sometimes it means clarity. After the dinner, something subtle but irreversible happened. My family stopped trying to pull me back and started trying to orbit me instead. It didn't look dramatic on the surface. No confrontations, no ultimatums, no explosive arguments. Just small shifts that revealed a much deeper change in the power dynamic. My mother stopped calling me to check in. She started texting to ask. My sister stopped sending emotional messages about the kids missing me. She began asking when it would be convenient for me to visit. My brother stopped joking about my luck. He started forwarding articles about wealth management and asking what I thought. And my father grew quiet, not cold, thoughtful. That was new. For the first time in my life, my success wasn't something he could fold into his own identity easily. It didn't fit the narrative he'd spent decades building about discipline, predictability, and following the right path. I hadn't followed his path, and yet I'd surpassed every milestone he'd ever set as proof of worth. That forced a reckoning he couldn't outsource. I noticed it the first time he came to me for advice. It happened over the phone late one evening. "I've been asked to sit on a board," he said, casually, too casually. "They're looking at some restructuring. Thought you might have insight." I paused, not because I didn't have insight, but because of what the moment represented. "You want my opinion?" I asked. "Yes," he replied. "Not advice, not guidance. Opinion. Equal footing." I gave it, clear, concise, professional. No edge, no bitterness, just substance. When I finished, there was a pause. "You're good at this," he said quietly. I smiled, though he couldn't see it. "I always was." He didn't argue.
That silence was louder than any praise. The real test came a month later. My family planned a large anniversary celebration for my parents, 40 years of marriage. Big guest list, extended family, old friends, a public affirmation of stability and success. I received the invitation in the mail. Not a text, not a call, a formal embossed card. I stared at it for a long time before sending it down. This wasn't about whether I'd attend, it was about why they wanted me there. I called my mother. "I got the invitation," I said. She sounded relieved. "Good, we hoped you would." "Hoped?" I repeated. "Yes," she said carefully. "It would mean a lot." "To whom?" I asked. There was a pause. "To all of us," she said finally. I closed my eyes. "Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly." "All right." "If none of this had happened, if the acquisition never closed, if my name never appeared in the paper, would I still be invited?" Silence stretched across the line. Then, quietly, "I don't know." I appreciated that more than she realized. "I'll come," I said, "but not as proof of anything." She exhaled. "Thank you." The anniversary party was immaculate. Flowers everywhere, soft music, a slideshow of memories playing on a large screen, weddings, vacations, birthdays, carefully curated nostalgia. When I walked in, conversations paused, not awkwardly, curiously. People smiled, some hugged me, some shook my hand like they weren't sure which gesture applied anymore. I wore a simple outfit, elegant, understated, nothing that screamed wealth. I wasn't there to perform. I was there to observe. And what I observed was fascinating. My father watched me throughout the evening, not anxiously, not proudly, but attentively, like someone studying a landscape they thought they knew, only to realize it had changed shape. At one point, an old family friend approached him. "That's your daughter?" the man asked, nodding toward me. "Impressive." My father nodded slowly. "Yes, she is. Not successful, not wealthy, impressive."
Later, my sister pulled me aside. "They're all asking about you," she said, half amused, half exhausted. I smiled. "You don't have to answer for me." "I know," she said. "It's just strange." "What is?" I asked. "Not being the one everyone expects things from," she admitted. I studied her face, saw something there I hadn't noticed before. Relief. She hadn't just benefited from my family's hierarchy, she'd been trapped by it too. That night, after most guests had left, my father asked me to walk with him outside. The air was cool, quiet, the noise of the party muted behind us. "I've been thinking," he said. "About what?" I asked. "About New Year's Eve," he replied. "About how we treated you." I waited. "You weren't banned because you failed," he continued. "You were banned because you scared us." I turned to him. "Scared you how?" "You lived without needing our approval," he said, "and we mistook that for recklessness." I nodded slowly. "That's fair," I said. He looked at me. "I spent my life believing success was something you earned by staying inside certain lines. And I stepped outside them," I said. "Yes," he replied, "and you didn't fall." We stood there in silence for a moment. "I don't know how to fix that," he admitted. I met his eyes. "You don't have to." He frowned slightly. "I don't?" "No," I said, "you just have to stop trying to control what you don't understand." That landed. He nodded once. "I can do that." After that night, the dynamic settled. Not into closeness, into respect. My family stopped trying to reshape me, stopped asking me to justify my choices, stopped treating my life like a phase that would eventually align with theirs. And in return, I stopped needing distance. I visited occasionally, answered calls when I wanted to, said no without guilt, said yes without obligation. Money didn't heal old wounds, but it stripped away illusions. It made motivations visible. It forced honesty where politeness had once hidden resentment and fear. I saw clearly now that my family hadn't doubted my intelligence. They doubted my obedience. And when I succeeded without it, they didn't know how to place me anymore.
So they stopped trying. One evening, months later, my father sent me a photo. It was of the old family group chat, the one where I'd been banned from New Year's Eve. He'd renamed it, Family, No Conditions. Underneath, he wrote, "I'm learning." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I replied, "That's enough." Because the truth was, becoming a billionaire changed how the world treated me, but it was standing my ground before anyone knew my worth that changed how I treated myself. The moment it truly came full circle wasn't dramatic. There were no headlines, no speeches, no sudden realization delivered in a perfect sentence. It happened on an ordinary morning, months after the acquisition, when my phone rang at 6:12 a.m. It was my father. I almost didn't answer, not because I was avoiding him, but because I had finally reached a place where urgency no longer belonged to anyone else. I answered anyway. "Are you awake?" he asked. "I am now," I said lately. He hesitated. "I'm at the hospital." Something in his voice tightened my chest. "What happened?" I asked. "Nothing serious," he said quickly. "Your mother fainted. They're running tests. She's stable." "I'm coming," I said, already sitting up. He paused. "You don't have to." That was new. "I know," I replied, "but I want to." The hospital smelled like disinfectant and old coffee. I found him in the waiting room, hands folded, staring at the floor. He looked smaller there, less like the man who once decided who belonged and who didn't. When he saw me, he stood immediately. "You came fast," he said. "I live close," I replied. He nodded, then looked away. "She keeps asking for you." That surprised me. In the past, my mother had been the quiet enforcer of the family hierarchy. She rarely initiated conflict, but she also never stopped it. Silence had been her language. I followed the nurse into the room. She looked tired, pale, but alert. When she saw me, her eyes filled with tears immediately. "I'm sorry," she said, before I could speak. "For what?" I asked gently. She replied, "For thinking love had rules." I swallowed. She reached for my hand. "I thought protecting the family meant protecting the image. I didn't realize how much it hurt you." I sat beside her bed. "It hurt because I wanted to belong." She said, "You always did. We just didn't know how to make space for a version of you we couldn't guide." There it was.
Not rejection. Fear. "I don't need guidance anymore," I said softly. "Just honesty." She nodded. "I see that now." When I stepped back into the hallway, my father was waiting. "She told me," he said, "about what she said to you." I nodded. He exhaled slowly. "I built my life around control, around certainty. And when you chose uncertainty, I panicked." I met his eyes. "You punished what you didn't understand." "Yes," he said, and then I watched it succeed. We stood there in silence for a long moment. "I'm proud of you," he said again, "but not because of the money." I waited. "Because you didn't bend," he finished, "even when we tried to make you." That was the apology. Not loud, not emotional, but complete. Life moved forward after that. My mother recovered fully. My father retired quietly from his last advisory role. My siblings adjusted. Not instantly, not perfectly, but sincerely. The power dynamic didn't swing toward me. It dissolved, which was better. I didn't become the center of the family. I became a choice. I attended gatherings when I wanted to, skipped them when I didn't, helped when it felt right, declined without guilt. No one questioned it, because they finally understood something fundamental. Access to me was no longer automatic. It was mutual. One afternoon, nearly a year after the night I'd been banned from New Year's Eve, I received a message from my brother. "We're thinking of doing something small this year. You in?" No pressure, no qualifiers, just an invitation. I smiled. "Yes," I replied, "if it's actually small." A laughing emoji followed. New Year's Eve came again. This time, I stood in my parents' living room, glass in hand, surrounded by people who looked at me not with judgment or awe, but familiarity. The clock ticked toward midnight. Someone turned on music. Someone else started counting down early and got shushed. When the clock hit 12, we hugged. No fireworks visible from the window, no champagne sprayed, just warmth.
Later that night, as people drifted off to bed, my father lingered beside me near the doorway. "You know," he said, "when we told you not to come last year, I thought I was protecting the family." "I know," I said. "I didn't realize," he continued, "that I was protecting myself from feeling irrelevant." I met his gaze. "You were never irrelevant," I said. "You were just no longer the authority on who I was allowed to become." He nodded slowly. "That's the part I had to learn." I smiled. "We all did." When I returned home that night, the city was quiet. Fireworks had faded, streets were empty. I stood by my window, looking out at the lights, thinking about how strange it was that becoming a billionaire hadn't been the thing that changed my life the most. That transformation had already happened, the moment I stopped asking for permission, the moment I accepted being misunderstood, the moment I chose myself, even when it cost me belonging. Money amplified the outcome, but conviction created it. My family banned me from New Year's Eve because I didn't fit their idea of success. They welcomed me back once success fit their idea. But by then, I had already learned the truth that mattered most. Belonging that requires erasing yourself is never worth earning. I didn't come back because they changed. I came back because I had. And I stayed, not as proof, not as pride, not as a headline, but as myself. Unconditional. Finally. Completely.